Hello and welcome to another episode of the Animal Rights Show. We have an action-packed hour planned for you. I think especially for me because I know I've observed what seems to be a bit of a gap between some so-called activists or newer activists and kind of the critical theory within the movement. So I think we're going to have an exciting opportunity today to help kind of close that gap, and specifically in the relation to the oppression of both women and other animals, and more specifically is that kind of animalization of women as well as the sexualization of our fellow animals. And I don't know about everybody listening, but I'm excited to kind of get into the theory and kind of how we can apply this to our animal advocacy with some specific examples. Just a little bit of a running order. We're going to turn it over to our guest panelist, who I'm thrilled to announce is Carol J. Adams, author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, and also has a new book out, The Pornography of Meat. And I'm sure she'll tell you a lot more about that in a moment here. And really just a thought pioneer in this space. And I think this is, I'm just thrilled to get into it. So hopefully this next hour helps us to do just that. With that, how are you doing, Carol? Welcome to the Animal Rights Show.
Thank you. Thank all of you for all your work, collective work, getting this going and uniting us during a pandemic and around these issues.
Yeah, and I know you and Roger met a number of years ago, so it's nice to see everybody kind of connecting during these kind of uncertain times.
Yeah, 20 years.
We were out in the cold, weren't we, in Sheffield, in Yorkshire, Carol? Yeah.
Yes, we were 20 years ago. So we've been around the block over and over again.
And welcome everybody who's joined us: Chickpea, Sarni, Chris, Tone, Meadow, Vegana, Constantina, Nikki, Sam,
Muddy
Rocio,
Paul,
Kristen,
Michelle,
Muddy. It's really great to see a great turnout. So I say we get straight into it. I mean, I think Carol, I think had some opening remarks that maybe you said around 15 minutes, and then we can kind of get into a bit more of a live discussion and encourage everyone to participate in the comments and really just get a bit of a Q&A going. Okay,
so I'm going to show some slides, but before I do, I wanted to set the scene to say The Sexual Politics of Meat came out 30 years ago. This year, the updated Pornography of Meat came out. So we're talking about a 30-year stretch in which I've been collecting images and examples of what I see as this animalization of women and sexualization of animals. If I had a soundbite, that might be part of it. But before I begin, I wanted to show you the fact that though you'll be seeing images, and many of them are of actual physical objects, and these objects are not one-dimensional as we'll experience them on a screen, but they occupy three-dimensional space. So we're interacting with them as objects, not as images. For instance, let's see if I could, there. This is a beer lover's beer sorry, I have to get my coordination right. Beer lover's beer. So you've got a white woman's back with a pink lobster on top of her. So when someone's holding this beer, they're also grasping an image. They're reinforcing the misogyny at another level. Or this. Here is, so somebody was kind enough to send me the packaging for this. Let's see. I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is this low-fat, this guinea cow. So this guinea cow has a tape measure around her waist. The idea is that you have this kind of ice cream sandwich, you'll be skinny too. But the misogyny here is about fat phobia, body type, but also the idea that cows even should be aware of weight when it's the skinny cow who's actually the sick cow. Or this dog toy from Italy. So Screaming Polo.
Oh, wow.
It's a dog toy. Again, you've got all this pinkness like the lobster with the mouth open. So here's a real misogynist thing. I see a lot of images that imply animals themselves are looking at women the way the sort of heteronormative world looks at women.
That dog toy looks like a sex toy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so. And then it's a grill. This is from Chick-fil-A. It was a national chain in the United States. I don't know if it's international, but when they did this campaign, they had this outside. It's a grill, the pink, the femininity again, a pinkness being both white and feminine. But I went to the local store to talk to the person about it, and he said not only did they have this up, but they were handing out cigars to male customers, and all of this is about a dead chicken. But it's truly sort of oppressive imaging. So let's look at some more. I'm going to load my slideshow, and Jeremy's going to take it from there. Jeremy, is that content warning up now?
It is.
Okay. So just to remind you all that while these images and many others like them are already in wide circulation, seeing this volume of images all at one time with this kind of attention and critical frame of reference may make them disturbing in a way that they have not been before. Having to confront these images may feel triggering to you along different experiences that are shaped by other oppressive social structures that independently interconnect, such as race, sexuality, class, and gender expression. The hope is that the cumulative power of these diverse images can also spark insight and resistance to their messages. So, as I said, the book came out 30 years ago. Have things changed, you might be wondering. The pornography of meat, the new and updated version, is the answer. My answer is no. But throughout this presentation, we'll see that what I described and criticized then is alive and circulating now. We still live in a white supremacist, human-centered, patriarchal world. So after the book appeared, the first thing that changed was my life. People write me and tell me the book changed their lives, but the book is constantly changing my life too. And one way it did was all of these images and examples, matchbooks, people stopping and taking photos, taking menus and sending them to me, which began what I call an oppressive images collection. You saw some of the items at the beginning. I call the people who send these to me grassroots sociologists, and I invite you to be one as well. I feel we need to record how extensive this is. The first aspect of the sexual politics of meat and the pornography of meat is the idea that men need to eat meat. They have to man up or eat like a man. Remasculization goes through continual stages as masculinity, a construct of the gender binary facing constant destabilization, feels always under threat. And with lots of these images, you'll see that it's really white men who are targeted as the viewers and the consumers. So imagine this, the manly man can't get flowers. I mean, all the gender binary assumptions that go on here. So you have to get beef jerky. So these advertisements suggest an anxious masculinity. The commitment to meat, dairy, and eggs and sea animals is a patriarchal commitment. Representations of meat and dairy and eggs mobilize retrograde reactionary beliefs about men and meat eating. And the interesting thing is that it's so unstable that if you don't eat meat for lunch or dinner or breakfast or something, you're signaling your complete departure from norms about manliness. All you have to do is skip one meat identified meal around other men, and suddenly all of manliness comes under attack. Here, this is Germany, T-bone instead of tofu. Posturing against veganism is a way to declare one's masculinity. Here's one from Dublin. Wish this was made from tofu, said no one ever. I say it all the time, but then maybe I'm a no one. So what's going on? Tofu offers protein. This is a revolutionary destabilization of male-identified colonial Western protein. And in the Pornography of Meat, the new edition, I argue that Western cultures co-constructed meat-eating, masculinity, nationhood, and white supremacy. So the masculinity being invoked is connected to whiteness. It's white manhood that is somehow constantly under threat. If not by tofu, then by salad. So good, even guys like our salad. Yes, that's me stopping to take a photograph, and my son was in the car, so he decided to photograph the photographer. But do you get the misogyny here? So good, even guys like our salads. Men have the right to be pleased. Women don't have to have their desires met or don't have desires that are noticed. It's assumed we'll settle for less. The belief that meat is the best or only protein source is a racist belief, after all, discounting the way the majority of the cultures of this world ate. During the 19th century, meat eating became associated with colonial expansion by Western countries, especially Great Britain. They were masculizing those Western countries and feminizing what they called rice-eating countries. So the colonized became equated with feminized rice eaters, and non-beef eating ways became signs of weakness and were emasculating. And we see this still operating. In the sexual politics of meat, I propose that animals become absent referents in meat, dairy, and eggs. They disappear as individuals with desires and relationships and become objects. They disappear as living beings, and that we would conceptualize as a certain cow or a certain chicken, each with their own personality, and become corpses that are then divided up and consumed. Even though in the past 30 years, we've seen lots of chef shows where animals are actively killed on screen, they're still absent reference in the sense that they are seen as so emptied of individuality that they can be killed in that manner. This is David Lynch's Eat My Fear Cow. He made that for the New York City Cow Parade many years ago. 100 fiberglass cows placed all over New York. This one was placed in Midtown Manhattan, and little kids came around it and started to cry, so it was covered and removed. But so that's the operating of the absent referent. We don't really want to know, though knowing doesn't stop people either. But in general, it's kept under wraps, the disembowelment and killing of animals. This was what was interesting about this is that somebody knew I had this photo, and it turned out David Lynch himself didn't have a photo of it, so I had to share it back with him. In both Sexual Politics of Meat and Pornography of Meat, I look at fragmentation and oppression. So this is the famous image on the front of Sexual Politics of Meat, based on a image for a steakhouse in New York City. But it's basically body chopping. Body chopping is a formal term for images and advertisements that display only a part of an individual. Advertisers dismember body parts to enhance the effectiveness of an ad. At least that's the ostensible reason for depicting a shoulder or a leg rather than an entire body. But ads often depict women's bodies without heads or faces. Much less frequently, men are depicted in this manner. So here's an old trope of, whose legs are you talking about, women's legs or a dead chicken's legs? But this is very recent, just a couple years ago in Bristol. This mural for a Cajun restaurant here in Dallas is a reminder that women's bodies are under surveillance. They can be stared at and appropriated. Whose perspective came up with the idea that the way to advertise a crayfish restaurant is through showing the supposed fragmenting fantasies of a male crayfish? Most animals are not consumed whole. They're chopped up or fragmented. A fragmented animal's leg, but with feminized red high heels for a magazine cover. This is a steakhouse announcing it would soon be opening with a different entrance in Birmingham. And of course, it just showed a part of a woman's body. Fabulous new rear. Notice that, it's white underpants, very always evoking purity and virginity. This is new a couple weeks ago from Europe, the fragmented white woman's body, again, no face. And another new one that when you do show a fragmented woman's body, and this again is a fragmented white woman, just a part of her face is shown, no eyes. You've got red lips and dead flesh, but also a patriarchal fascination with what women's mouths will consume. Here's a recent one from Selfridges in London. Breast enhancer, see at the bottom, it says it lets you take the taste up a size. Again, a fat phobia in its own way, what can be big, what can be large versus what can't. This is an issue that women want to take their breast sizes up, that they need to always examine how their body looks, make it more attractive, the reminder of the surveillance of women's bodies and a fragmenting view of women's and animals' bodies. So in these ways, women and animals become overlapping absent referents in which the oppression of one group is used to heighten and intensify the oppression of another. Justifications for exploitation move between and among the absent referents, confirming a dominant viewpoint that these are bodies for use. Because of the concept of the absent referent, I'm not saying women are like animals. Animals are like women. This is a very sort of conservative animal rights approach that tries to do comparisons. And I think comparisons are deadly. Comparisons are wrong. That weakens our argument to take animals seriously by saying, oh, animals are like someone else we already take seriously. I'm saying that their own unique oppression is used to leverage the oppression against the other being dominated. So in this example, the butchered animals are the absent referent. And in this example, a sexualized woman is the absent reference. So here's the sexualized animal. The interesting thing is here we see the movement of poses across a species boundary. But once you show a chicken or a pig in the same position as a woman, the man usually is removed because the implication of bestiality would be too strong. So usually there's an absence of the man, though that's who they are all posing for. This is what I've been sent many images like this. This is from Europe. The sexualized woman is the absent referent on the back of a transport truck taking pigs to slaughter, when we know that pigs would actually look like this. This too is a slaughter pig transport truck. It says transport with passion. It's strange, isn't it, that the only desire animals are credited with having is the desire to be killed and eaten. So the sexual politics of meat, the pornography of meat, exploits the asymmetrical, unequal relationship of gender to normalize animal oppression. And so it's, again, naturalizing the gender binary too. It's also naturalizing this consumer vision in which farmed animals are imputed to desire their own death and consumption. In this image, you can't really even tell whether this is a pig or a woman because the breasts being evoked, there's just two of them, and pigs have more nipples than that. So here you've got the misogyny, again, a fragmented woman who can argue back when you don't have a head. So the animals depicted in these positions are powerless, yet they want it. Again, here's some pinkness for femininity and whiteness. They're dead, yet they beckon. Lots of pinkness here. The stand-ins for women smile or wink. They want you to want them. They want to be killed. They want to be available to you. If any of you are near Cambridge, let me know if this is still near the train station. These female animals are begging for it. Filthy Cow was a restaurant in Manchester, and this is where you went by. All the feminizing, sexualizing, the pearls, the fishnet stockings, the high heels, these are tropes that we'll see over and over again. Dublin, bacon gives me a lard on. So misogyny is supposedly not talking about women here, but the other animals. And so in the cultural logic of human superiority, these depictions are seen as harmless and just a joke. In the sexual politics of meat, I coined the term feminized protein to point out that mammalian milk extracted from cows, as well as eggs from hens forced to produce, is protein processed by a female body. Feminized protein exists as a result of the exploitation of the female body. Roger sent me this one. Ouch, look at all this whiteness. A white man loving his white boxed fresh milk, white t-shirt, a pastoral landscape. Here's a nostalgia for a simpler time. Nostalgia is often evoked in some of these images for a simpler time when, before women's liberation. Just a footnote that it was found that people who voted for Trump in 2016 all felt the 1950s were a better decade, and the 1950s were just the height of oppression for women and in the United States, people of color who were experiencing our version of apartheid. But anyway, whiteness also because it is whites who are able to digest mammalian milk, those who are descendants of Europeans, Eastern Europeans, and the majority of the world cannot digest mammalian milk after childhood, after infancy. So here's just a reminder how cows have their milk taken away from them. It's not pastoral. And her offspring is a competitor for the fluid extracted mammalian milk that must be monetized. So look at how all the cows watch as the newborn calf is removed. Will the cow be able to resist humans' ways and chase after her calf? If she can, she will. But resistance on the other side of the species line ends up with a death sentence. So one cow who tried to fracture a kneecap with a very precise kick was sent to be killed, and this homemade bitch from hell ear tag for that cow was posted to Uptrend Farm and Agriculture. You can see it had like 1,300 shares, 4,000 love this, the plus side about writing your own ear tags. And so many of them reported their own ear tags, which included the slut, revenge is sweet, kill. And the interesting thing is the same farmers who say they care about the animals talk this way about them. And as I say, if you love your animals and this is what happens to them, I'm glad you don't love me. So have things changed since the sexual politics of meat came out in 30 years ago? Here's a feminized pig from 1979. And this one is from Atlanta 2 years ago. There they are together. Or the images of the two editions of the Pornography of Meat. The one, will it be your left as well, I hope. The 100% pure beef was a mural in New York City. And the one on the right is from Los Angeles just last year, Eat Me. There's those fishnet stockings, the red high heels. Again, the only, women without any head, but yet somehow this burger can speak. One big difference is the awareness of activism around these issues. Even though the oppressive representations and material objects continue to be produced and circulate, reflecting a white supremacist patriarchal culture, we can find increasing resistance to these kinds of messages from a feminist vegan perspective. I love this response to the European image I showed you earlier. The book being quoted is the Spanish edition of The Sexual Politics of Meat. And so too, this one was criticized, citing the Spanish edition as well. As you can imagine, I love this tweet. Hello, Earthlings. Let's all read The Sexual Politics of Meat and then meet back here for a do-over. So thank you. Let's talk about the Pornography of Meat, why I had to update it, what you think of this analysis, and back to you all.
Well, it's pretty amazing, Carolyn. There's a a lot of reaction in the comments, which is really good, because there's going to be a whole generation this is going to be kind of new to, which is, as Jeremy said, it'd be quite good to kind of bridge that gap, if you like. If I respond to two or three things, people will know that I was sent to prison for animal rights reasons for 4 years, and you talked about body chopping, and one thing I noticed when you kind of passed other people's cells on the way to get your food and everything, they had a lot of pornography, and often when they didn't have any more space, they then started to cover up the parts of the body that they didn't want to look at. So unless it was oral sex, they would often cover the head up in the same way as these adverts do, in the sense that that wasn't an essential part of the body that they wanted to see. In relation to the absent referent, when we were in Dublin, there was a complaint against our stand from a burger bar, which was behind us, and so we had to go and speak to the Temple Bar company, and they said that the burger bar are complaining because your stand is putting people off their burgers, and we said, well, we don't have any graphic imagery. And then we realized that we didn't need any, because the absent referent was enough. The fact that we had images of other animals was enough for them to reconnect the burger to the cow. And so the absent referent was kind of at work there. And in relation to asking to be eaten, there used to be, I just had a quick look, there used to be a website called Suicide's Food. I can't find it right now, but that was the website it was called. And that was a lot of images of other animals cutting themselves up and all that kind of stuff, as it were, into portions, that kind of stuff. So we might be able to find that. And finally, in my PhD, I had a picture outside a fish and chip shop in Bangor in North Wales, and it had a picture of a fish, and the fish was saying, "Me and chips," So it's all still there, and it's all imbued in our culture. It's just everywhere. That's the important part to remember, I guess.
Thank you, Roger. I think those are good examples. I mean, the fact is, I think we have to remember that non-vegans already know what they're doing. They've just learned how to bury it. And that reminders from us activate all their defensive reactions because they want to continue to bury it. So, just showing animals, we don't have to be graphic to convey our activism. Do you want me to answer the two questions I see here so far, or do you all want to? Oh, there we go. Okay.
That sounds perfect.
All right. Mike, do you think there's a relationship between changing attitudes towards the objectification consumption of women and the increase in the number of vegans, is having a positive impact on the animal rights movement? I felt that certainly the feminist movement in the 70s really, before animal liberation, even a lot of feminists were talking about vegetarianism back then for a variety of reasons, which has to do with consciousness changing. I know that there is a certain aspect of feminism, as in other movements, that says, don't bring animals into this. We've got enough to fight. We're trying to have women seen as humans. Don't confuse us with animals. And there's still that response. I also know that one of the places that we've had a hard time getting feminism heard is the animal rights movement itself. And I'm still getting calls from victims within the movement who think Me Too was successful in the movement, and it wasn't. The men who were identified as sexual exploiters are still working in the movement, and lots of men who weren't identified publicly because of fear of being sued are still in the movement. So, I just say that we ourselves in the animal rights movement haven't incorporated feminism. I believe, finally, that a feminist philosophy that believes in the amelioration of life and the transformation from violence to nonviolence is not just talking about human relationships, and that feminism is touching resistance to animal exploitation, but there's a lot more work to be done.
And the next one's from Maria.
Just a moment. Before we go to that, I feel that we have to issue a content warning because the next part of the discussion may be triggering for survivors of sexual assault.
Thank you.
And also, I want to add something to this question because I intended to ask that. Many advocates in the movement feel that since the breeding of other animals involves the violence towards their bodies, the penetration without consent, that using the term rape is appropriate. And those that refrain from doing that do it mainly because of the triggering effect.
Right.
So would you like to talk about the rape of other animals and the butchering of women?
So when I wrote the Sexual Politics of Meat, the second chapter was called The Rape of Animals, the Butchering of Women. And that's where I laid out the theory of the absent referent. But I'm basically saying that the use of metaphors to describe experiences is where we're going wrong. So I use that title to then disempower that title because because we are creating other absent referents when we compare. I clearly was misunderstood, and so we've had this debate. Basically, I feel that survivors of rape have the right to use the terms that they feel are appropriate, but that others should not, that our language is extensive enough to describe sexual exploitation of the other animals without that term, that I found that a lot of times it's male vegans who are using the term rape, and they're using it towards feminists about why feminists aren't vegan. And I feel that, there are feminists talking to feminists. There's books on it. We don't need you men to come in and ruin the dialogue by using dominance and forcefulness and inappropriate language. Why not go talk to everybody else who hasn't become vegan? And finally, when we use the word rape, like the rape of cows, what we've done is reduce a life of misery that involves not just being pregnant against her will, having the calf taken from her, standing and having milk taken from her, a full life that's being constitutes misery every day of her life down to one act. And I feel that is not an appropriate way to describe the cow's life, because we are then going for one act rather than the continuity of her life. So I do not use the word rape in the Pornography of Meat. I do try to show how some of the tropes and some of the "oh, she deserved it," all of that language is part of a rape culture. But I use sexual exploitation myself.
That's a great alternative and an easy one to use from all advocates.
Yeah, something I've certainly observed is we oftentimes hone in on the males, the children because they're oftentimes killed in a day or two, and that's seen as more shocking. But I think painting that whole picture is definitely it's not just the males obviously that are being having their rights violated.
I just want to. Dairy, egg production, they're terrible for every being. I'm interested in the way femaleness gets exploited and then, uses the sexually exploitative normative language from humans and applies it and so that it's like an anti-Me Too movement, animal agriculture. And they're doing it with a wink too. They know this isn't what animals want, but they're creating this notion. I would say that what it does show is the benefits of having a feminist analysis when talking about animal agriculture. But I don't think we start by saying, well, cows are being raped. We start by saying, what does a feminist analysis of animal agriculture show us? It shows us all of these things.
Yeah, and we have a suggestion from Amber around perhaps saying the violation of reproductive systems. I don't know what you think about that. And in your term, absent referent, I wonder if, I was just thinking of ways we can apply this to our advocacy, which I appreciate. It's, takes a lot of study to fully understand these concepts. But just to get started, I wonder if like invisibilized victim could be a simple way to kind of communicate that kind of concept. I don't know what your thoughts on that or Carol or anyone or listeners as well.
But I think the problem with that is in terms of the absent referent, I'm saying they're there and they're not there. They're both present and absent. The being, the living being is absent, but the dead body's there. And so I think one of the things I was trying to do with the absent referent was capture that thing that people know they're eating dead animals, but they don't want to know. It's a dialectic and a dilemma, a dichotomy, whatever. And so invisibilized victim, while it's accurate to a degree, isn't capturing the entirety of the dilemma. I mean, when we talk to non-vegans, we're making the absent referent present in a variety of ways. So we don't. I don't know. I just think it's a little more complex. So I'm glad that you're exploring how do we do this. So a violation of reproductive system. Well, that would be good. I mean, it would also recognize that cows and pigs and turkeys, males, are having their semen taken from them. In the Pornography of Meat, one of the things I do is talk about all the phallic images that occur in animal agriculture and in the impregnating of female animals. And this, one of the other things I didn't have time to show you were all these images as though animals are having heterosexual sex that becomes sort of heteronormative too, that this is how pigs would want to have sex, or this is how pigs are having sex. All of these things that sort of reinforce a dominant male sexuality and reinforce heterosexuality, imply that animals are heterosexual, all that, again, another aspect of the gender binary. But the violation of the reproductive system, I think it's a great way to begin a conversation and would be better than rape. Thank you.
Yeah, I responded to Amber by saying that Piers Byrne, who is a critical criminologist, he used to, I'm not quite sure if he's using this concept anymore, but he used to talk about interspecies sexual assault, but really he was talking about what is often called bestiality. And so I'm not quite sure whether you could extend that.
I think you'd have to ask him, because I know he and I corresponded about some of this. And I really feel he was looking specifically at human, non-human animal sexual contact. But again, there's a really interesting paper that shows how bestiality laws in the United States all have to have an exception for animal agriculture, because the description of bestiality so applies to animal agriculture impregnating female animals and manipulating male animals to ejaculate, that if you didn't have an exception, they'd all be able to be prosecuted for bestiality. So there's that too, that they know that they're that close to this kind of unwanted sexual contact between species.
Also, on a related point, Carol, in some US states, there are legal animal brothels, aren't there? or at least they're not illegal. And so, because there's that thing about, the guys take their own bucket to stand on in order to be high enough to penetrate the cow or the horse, this kind of stuff. And so I believe that in some states it's illegal, in some it's one of those things, you got that thing about illegal and misdemeanor and that kind of stuff in the States, but also I think it's one of those things which is not enforced in some states. I don't know if you know about that.
Well, there's also this notion, I wrote an article on it for Animals Agenda back when that magazine existed, and it was the most depressing thing I've ever written. But basically, even the theories about why bestiality exists go towards sort of assumptions about male heterosexuality, sexuality, which is just it's so perverse in its own way. But maybe we should move back to why we use forceful terms. I see Sam says, out of desperation, frustration at animal exploitation being ignored. Yes, but why is it being ignored? I mean, in the animal rights movement, we've had a methodology that's very influenced by male leaders, whether, in UK, US, wherever. And this led to, what were some of the first animal rights activism of the 80s? It was harassing women wearing fur. It was like, we go from sexual harassment to harassing women wearing fur. We have tended towards activism that follows, what I'll simplistically call a male model of calling out, of being confrontative, of believing that this is how change occurs. And this notion that we've got to escalate our language to be heard is, I think, a part of that. There are gentle ways to be advocates. And, another aspect of my work is the feminist ethics of care, that we bring attention to our interactions. We bring attention to what's happening to animals. We ask them, what are you going through? And we can tell. Well, we could use that model also in activism. I think we've had a limited notion of what activism is, and that listening to feminist analyses might help us be more transformative when we interact. And I know it's hard to eat with people who are non-vegan. So, I'll just acknowledge that.
I think in some ways it's also a kind of a lazy way of doing activism, just to try trigger people with these type of words, with a lack of kind of fully understanding and lack of respect for the individual who we're kind of engaging in conversation with. Carol, there's one thing I just wanted to ask you, actually, because I know that you, in the talk that we just heard, you mentioned talking about how, I guess this kind of stemmed from the far right, but how products like soy have been sort of feminized towards men. And I know that I see that in the vegan movement, there is this label, the soy boy, which has kind of been labeled, but I've used that term myself, but I wonder if that is, in a sense, it's kind of being labeled in a way that's by men who are trying to say, I'm a soy boy, I'm strong, and this is what kind of matters. Is it kind of feeding this kind of patriarchal sense of what it is to be a man, and is it actually helping in any way? What are your thoughts on that?
So several, thank you. So the feminization and equation of tofu and colonization and all really goes back to the 19th century. And so this feminization of rice-eating cultures, bi-viral cultures, which is the first chapter of Sexual Politics of Meat. And then I revisit it here and update it. But we saw it after the Vietnam War, or during the Vietnam War, or what the United States calls the Vietnam War. Again, there were rice eaters. The notion that soy feminizes is more recent, that soy, hormonally feminizes. This was feminizing sort of politically and culturally 19th and 20th. Now in about 1995 or something, there was this one very bad study that implied that soy caused men to have breasts, and it was based on someone who ate a huge amount of soy in one day that just, most people would not. And that got taken up by a foundation here in the United States that's really pushed it. And the majority of soy at that time was being consumed by animals. So the soybean, industry didn't fight back about it, but it continued to proliferate. And so now we have some very bad science being upheld that, men shouldn't be drinking soy milk and breast cancer survivors shouldn't be drinking soy milk. And there's some really great work on that done by Mark Messina, a nutritionist, among other people. So we've then got that as a second thing. Then the third thing becomes the right wing, who want to put down all liberals as though they are anti-hamburger and, soy boys. So if those three things all come together, so what I think happens with the right wing, especially in the United States, is the right wing only makes more pronounced what's been normative in our culture, that men eat meat, and all those things. Those aren't just things from the right wing; those are things from our culture at large. The challenge for men who are vegans is figuring out their relationship to the gender binary. And so often I've seen this reaction like it's going to reassure, no, you can be a real man and be a vegan. It's like, well, what's a real man and why are we doing it that way? In the United States for a while, they called themselves hegans. Talk about fear of being equated with women. Why don't we talk seriously about why there's a fear of being equated with women? Because of misogyny. Why not help end the fear of being equated with women? And so in Pornography of Meat, I talk about abjection, the abjection of the male vegan, who's then thought to be gay or sissy, effeminized. Let's deal with what's at the heart of it, which is a hatred of women. Why would male vegans help perpetuate that? And yet I see it over and over again. It's like the salad question.
Yeah, and to that point, Carol's helped to arrange a discount for the Pornography of Meat. So if you are interested in checking out her new book, bloomsbury.com, I'll add a link afterwards so you can check that out. Going back for a moment, I'd like to go to Deb's comment because this could probably be a whole nother hour on its own and probably then some. I guess the question to all of us is kind of what do you think role capitalism plays in the history of these components around the advertising, and how responsible do you think it is for the exploitation of both women and other animals? I'd say a lot, in short.
I
appreciate that's not a very critical analysis, but
I think it's constitutive of the problem, but not exclusive. I mean, I think that socialism has issues around misogyny and use of animals. Certainly capitalism, it's like capitalism is a catalyst for all of that. I also want to register that while many of the images I used for advertising, they're not all advertising. That the problem is the attitude and not the advertisement. The advertisement illustrates the attitude. Certainly capitalism benefits whenever it can sell more objects. And Barbara Noske wrote a book, 30 some years ago, a really wonderful book on humans and other animals. And it's had two different names depending upon who the publisher is. But she talks about how production of meat is the perfect capitalist product because it takes so much to make so little. And so, and then she also looks at, in her first chapter, animals as the alienated labor, because their laboring is to produce their own bodies, or for cows to produce babies and milks and all that. But that the labor of the alienated labor on the other side of the species boundary is, they're alienated from their own body. That's what they have to produce. So I think she has a sort of brilliant analysis that we all should incorporate more. I'd love to know everybody else's thoughts.
Carol, I have, can you hear me okay? I'm not sure if my mic's working. Is
Yeah.
it okay? Yeah, I have, going back to something you were saying about the whole kind of patriarchal paradigm, maleness, and looking at sort of feminist ethics of care, compassion, empathy, connectedness, all these kind of thing. Just something that keeps coming to me in terms of things we talk about on the Animal Rights Show is we're trying to advocate for respect and for justice for animals, for the end of their use, and we don't want to stay in a welfarist paradigm. But would you say, so we might be avoiding, for example, language like compassion. We're trying to sort of move away from compassion and things like cruelty, kindness, and that kind of, be kind to animals. And Roger's favourite, have mercy for animals. But would you say it's important to infuse our advocacy with care, compassion in our language and our behaviour? And how do you see that we can speak of compassion but with a clear end of use message, and not just care and compassion for the other animals while we're using them? And then just like as a secondary question to that, if we don't talk about compassion and care, are we just then kowtowing to the normative patriarchal paradigm that we already have within the movement and in society?
Well, there's two different roads to go down here. I'll do really quickly the first road, which is that philosophically, we've had rights, we've had liberation, we've had sort of post-structuralist or deconstructive ways of talking about animals. But there's always been the framework of compassion and the feminist ethics of care. And it's been, I'll read histories and they'll talk about the three I just named, but feminist ethics of care just gets disappears, just like women activists before Peter Singer disappear. That the women's contribution to thought on this has not been engaged with. So we don't even know the potentiality. In terms of compassion and care, there is no way to love a being and then kill that being. That's what I was saying about the cow, the people who own cows and talk about cows, and that we love cows. And, if this is how you love a cow, by killing the cow, I certainly don't want you to love me like that. I think what's forgotten about compassion and care is that accountability is a part of it. For instance, with batterers or abusers, I care enough about you to hold you accountable for what you do. And if we move to a language of accountability, then that recognize that we all exist in relationships. I mean, Laurie Gruen talks about entangled empathy. We are all entangled in this world. But I care enough about you to hold you accountable when you're misogynist, when you're racist, when you participate in oppression. Oppression doesn't, sort of just get a pass because we're talking about feminist ethics of care. Feminist ethics of care might actually be the strongest advocacy model possible. And there was an interesting review of an early book we did. I've done an anthology with Josephine Donovan called, what is it called? It's like the feminist care ethics in the feminist care tradition in animal ethics, a reader. And one reviewer said, well, rights tells us not to harm an animal. But if you walk by an animal who's harmed, what does rights require of you? Whereas care would say, don't harm the animal and respond to the animal who is harmed. So there's perhaps more dynamic possibility in both advocacy and responding to the damage we're doing through care and compassion.
Yeah, thank you. That it does feel like, and I think Sharon brought up a comment earlier saying that respect is good because it encompasses compassion and kindness. And I think respect is born out of empathy anyway. I really do feel that empathy is the root often of our respect. Would you agree that respect is also part of compassion and empathy? Would you say that they go together?
Yes, I would need to think more about the language of respect. I'm trying to think of when it's used in a way that's harmful, or when it's used, I'm trying to think about anti-abortion actually, and when respect is used in that context. So I'd have to think more about it. I think a conversation about language is really important, and I don't want to pretend I have the definitive answer.
Yeah, because there's certainly animal users, farmers that would say they respect their animals, perhaps. But I think we'd all agree that's not, similar to your point on love, that's not genuine.
And I'm thinking of the sexual politics of meat right now because a large part of the book refers to language. And for me, it's a very useful book, and that all activists, all advocates should read. So my question is, do you believe that it is necessary for animal advocates, to read critical theory, and why?
Oh, thank you for that question. I do. I think without theory, activism can flounder. We're overwhelmed. There is so much to change and transform. But without activism, theory can be empty. I see them as it's not even two parts of a coin. I mean, it's like the heart and the mind. I mean, we know from feminism again that we think with our whole body. So a theory, for instance, Sexual Politics of Meat, I wrote theory as an activist. I don't have a PhD. I don't teach in academia. I didn't go to graduate school. I went to divinity school, which I tell you is not graduate school. So my theory is based on activism, being on the ground. And that kind of on the ground theory is written by people like me and others to enable activists to be more powerful and also to understand what's going on. Once we have a concept of the absent referent, we can look and say, well, what's the activism that transforms that? Once we have a concept of like feminized protein, I see a comment saying that, some male activists call it breast milk and all, these triggering things. But once we have a concept, then we can look at, and how is the institution doing that? So also, I think theory is needed because otherwise we will get no sleep. The need to change the world that drives us, and the vision of a world that's transformed often means that we think, how can I rest? How can I do anything? I'm not done with my work. And I think theory helps us understand that we're connected. We're not autonomous. We don't all have to do this all at the same time. We have to trust there are others. And that's in this poem I quoted, Sexual Politics of Meat, Eat Rice, Have Faith in Women. I have to trust that others will come. I have to trust there were people before me, and I have to trust that others will come. I have to trust that we are a network working together. And I just think that theory grounds that. Theory is empowering. Theory isn't something that you're just reading in a course. The goal of theory is to empower. And an empowered activist is a stronger activist.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Caroline. I'd just like to say thank you for your work as well, because that is sometimes, like you said, it's very empowering to have that critical theory, but it also, I think, gives you a language and an understanding of what you maybe have a feeling of in your body and your awareness, but you don't know how to express it, or you don't dare feel that your opinion is going to be respected or taken seriously. And it's great to have that feminist vegan perspective that runs throughout your work as well as because we have so many male critical theorists out there and philosophers and all of that we look to, but your body of work is really stands out for me as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know about the rest of you, but that hour has absolutely flown by. In addition, obviously, to the pornography of meat, I wonder if there's any other directions that any of us could share, and anybody listening in the comments, influential work that's kind of helped you to explore these topics more. I personally would like to explore the feminist critique of animal use further, because I do think. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, there's this powerful book, The Cow with Ear Tag 1349, Catherine Gillespie, and she goes and she talks about what happens when a scholar has to be engaged in going to auctions of cows, how she ends up wanting to buy a cow, and it's wonderful, powerful work. I'd also look out for the work of a feminist critical law theorist, I've had to pull so many names forward. She is doing brilliant work. The work of Breeze Harper, Sister Vegan, and her work, which some of it's online. The work of Patrice Jones. There's I'm just not going to.
There's Corey Wren as well.
Sorry, Corey, yes.
There's
But
Corey
I'm also
Wren,
thinking
Corey
about
Wren.
intersectional work that's so powerful.
This one I just finished.
Well, and the
Afko's work
first
is
one,
really-
Afroism, is great. I do want to quickly, I know we have to come to the end. And you had posted it for a second, most vegans are actively averse to anything to do with critical theory, feminism, or their own role in oppression. Maybe Carol could comment on this. Yeah, this is the result of veganism having the opportunity to be multi-focused and deciding not to. Not that, a cabal of people got together and just decided that. But any perpetuation of the notion that veganism is single issue is just deadly. It's not single issue. It never was single issue. I just did a show with Christopher Sebastian about the writing of Frankenstein and showing how the animal rights and vegetarians of that time were multi-focused. The single issue notion of veganism is recent and retrograde and dangerous. And perpetuating it shows an insecurity about identity that's shameful. We do not just live our lives as consumers, as eaters. We might eat 3 times a day, and veganism is a very powerful way of changing the lives of animals. But we do not just exist as consumers. How we relate to other people and the oppressions that we are interacting with every day matter. And I think it's often white privilege that keeps this notion of the single issue vegan as anything worth protecting. If this is the veganism we face in our future, I don't want it.
Yeah, and Jennifer's added an interesting comment here around Miss Piggy from the Muppet Show. I wonder if there's any.
Wasn't she?
Yeah, why was she so popular? She was on the cover of what magazine? I mean, they really played into this. Well, of course, is she supposed to be, oh my God, my poor brain. All right. Dolly Parton, is she supposed to be a sort of Dolly Parton character? I don't know. I mean, but certain. So let's just go back. Suzanne Kapler Suzanne Kapler in the 1980s said, "All culture is a mirror of patriarchy." You know, once we know that that's where we are, then of course Miss Piggy makes a lot of sense as a mirror of patriarchy. In this sense, veganism becomes a mirror of patriarchy if it's not feminist, vegan, anti-racist veganism. Are we going to be mirrors or are we not? Are we going to break the mirror or not?
Yeah, and there's just one last comment come through. I'm not sure if anybody wants to opine on the influence of postmodernism and, in short, kind of the rejection of so-called truth, or in some cases, the objective truth.
Well, I think it's a much more complicated than that. I appreciate that the question is asked and it moves to a whole bunch of things. And yet you've also got people like Derrida saying animal agriculture is the Holocaust. So is that a truth? Is that an opinion? Is that, you know, however we engage, I don't think we are yet in a post-factual society. And I think you see in the United States the results of a Republican Party that's tried to go post-factual, post-fact, create its own facts. I know that's not what postmodernism is. I'm not making a comparison. I'm just saying there are certain things that we know in our body, they're embodied. We know that an animal is dying. We know what kill means. So I think even within that context, let me say positively and affirmatively, continental philosophy has been a powerful resource for animal studies. I don't think it's the only resource. And I think that sometimes continental philosophy, which has tended to be slightly more Cartesian in its approach, has been used to ignore feminist theories that have not been postmodernist. So I'd be concerned about that. But I love the fact that we can have conversations about theory in this environment.
Yeah, and with that, I think I think it goes without saying that we all just thrilled to have you here, Carol, and obviously would like to extend the invite to come back and join us anytime, because there's only so much we can do in an hour, isn't there? I mean, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've got so many questions
so
for Carol. It's like, oh, I've got a page full. Can we have another 2 hours, please?
I think you created a great environment, a great culture, a great collective way of exploring these issues, and I wish you all much luck in these conversations, and I appreciate that you're interested in ideas like mine and for your support. So thank you.
And Carol, just before you go, you'll remember this, right?
Yes, I wrote the preface to that.
You did indeed. So this is Joan Denea, for people who are not familiar with it, Animal Equality, Language and Liberation, and it's very much up Jeremy Street being based on language, which is kind of all the way through. That's what imbues the thing. Do you know what happened to Joan Denea, Carol?
Yeah, she's around. Every once in a while, someone will write to me to write to her. I don't think her email is public, but I've been a conduit for several people doing research. It's a great book, really. I learn from it all the time. I went and looked up things for pornography of meat around the language around fishing. So very powerful. And there are many wonderful theorist writers out there, and enjoy the exploration.
Yeah, I've certainly been trying to track down a copy. I looked, and it's about 100 pounds, I think, to get it shipped here to the UK. So I'm going to keep the searches going. Because it's a shame, you know, it'd be great to get that knowledge out there more, because it's not a widely read or circulated book, which goes with a lot of that knowledge, I think.
Well, for half of that figure, Jeremy, I might be able to help you out.
You got your hands on a photocopied.
I wish I had another copy, Jeremy. I only have mine.
Understand, yeah.
Somebody stole
Well,
mine.
Thank you everybody for joining, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments. I think there's a lot of topics we could explore further, so if we didn't get to it, please keep the conversation going there. And thanks again, and we'll see everyone next week. And here's a little outro with some more of Carol's work.
Thank you, Carl.
As mirror and representation of patriarchal values. Meat eating is the reinscription of male power at every meal. The patriarchal gaze sees not the fragmented flesh